Mom, all our stuff is gone. Emma's trembling voice echoed through the phone, making my heart sink. We had just landed back from our 2-week Caribbean vacation, and my 8-year-old twins were supposed to be settling back into their rooms. Instead, I was hearing my daughter's sobs while my son Jake could be heard sniffling in the background. What do you mean gone? I asked, gripping my phone tighter as I rushed through the airport terminal, leaving my husband, Michael, to deal with the luggage. Grandma and Grandpa gave our rooms to Mr. Peterson's kids. All our things are in boxes in the attic. Emma's voice cracked. They said we should be grateful we have a corner up there. I felt my blood run cold. The Petersons, my in-laws' closest friends, had 3 teenage children who apparently needed a place to stay while their house underwent renovations. And my in-laws, who had been entrusted with watching our house, had decided to offer up my children's rooms without so much as a text message to us. Stay calm, sweetie. Daddy and I will be home in 20 minutes. The drive home was tense. Michael kept insisting there must be some misunderstanding, that his parents would never do something like this. But I knew better. Barbara and George Mitchell had always favored their friends' children over their own grandchildren. To them, the Petersons' kids were accomplished. The eldest was a tennis champion, the middle child a math prodigy, and the youngest some kind of musical genius. Meanwhile, my twins were just normal kids who enjoyed reading comics and playing in the backyard. As we pulled into our driveway, I saw Barbara standing on the porch, arms crossed, wearing that smug expression I'd grown to detest over the years. George was beside her, looking uncomfortable but resolute. Finally, Barbara called out as we approached. We've been trying to reach you. The Petersons needed a place to stay, and since you were away. You gave away my children's rooms? I kept my voice steady, though inside I was shaking with rage. Without asking us. Now, Amanda, George started, using that condescending tone he reserved for when he thought I was being unreasonable. The Petersons are going through a difficult time. Their renovation is taking longer than expected, and those children need proper spaces to maintain their rigorous study schedules. And what about my children? I asked, watching as Emma and Jake peeked out from behind the front door, their eyes red from crying. Barbara waved her hand dismissively. Oh, they're young. They can adapt. Besides, the attic is perfectly fine. We even put a fan up there for them. She smiled as if she deserved praise for this minimal consideration. You moved all their things without permission, I stated, my voice growing colder. Their books, their toys, their clothes. Those rooms were being wasted on comic books and stuffed animals. Barbara sniffed. Madison needs space for her tennis trophies, and Alexander requires proper lighting for his advanced mathematics studies. And little Victoria's piano barely fit through the door. But we managed. She beamed with pride, as if destroying my children's sanctuary was some kind of achievement. I looked at Michael, waiting for him to say something to defend our children. But he stood there, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, caught between his role as father and dutiful son. Some things never changed. Well, I said, my tone eerily calm. Thank you for letting us know. Barbara's smug smile faltered slightly. She had expected arguing, tears, maybe even a confrontation. My composure seemed to unsettle her. You're welcome, she said, uncertainty creeping into her voice. What my in-laws didn't know was that I had been preparing for something like this for months. Their pattern of dismissing my children's needs in favor of others had been escalating, and I had taken precautions. As I walked past them into the house, I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text to Diana, my lawyer. It's time. Plan B. The response came almost immediately. Documents ready. Meeting tomorrow at 9. Perfect. I replied, then turned to my shell-shocked family. Emma, Jake, go get your pajamas from the attic. You'll be sleeping in the guest room tonight. I pulled them close, whispering, don't worry, this is temporary. Mom's got this. As I helped my children gather their necessities, I could hear Barbara in the hallway showing off Madison's new training space and Alexander's study sanctuary to Michael. The Petersons' kids had already made themselves at home, their belongings spread across my children's rooms as if they owned them. That night, as the twins finally fell asleep in the guest room, exhausted from crying, I sat in the kitchen with my laptop open, reviewing the documents Diana had prepared months ago. My in-laws had no idea that their latest power play would trigger a series of events that would change everything. They thought they had the upper hand, that their position as homeowners gave them the right to make decisions about our living space. What they didn't know was that I had been documenting every incident, every dismissal of my children's needs, every time they had overstepped their boundaries. And more importantly, they had no idea about the inheritance I had received from my grandmother 3 months ago, enough to ensure my children would never have to depend on their grandparents' conditional generosity again. As I closed my laptop, I heard Barbara's voice drifting up from the first floor, gushing about how the Petersons' children were such a blessing and how they deserved the best. I smiled to myself, knowing that in less than 24 hours, their perfect plan would begin to unravel. Sometimes the best revenge isn't immediate confrontation. It's letting people think they've won, right before you pull the rug out from under them. The next morning, I walked into Diana's office feeling more determined than ever. She greeted me with a knowing smile, spreading out the paperwork we prepared months ago. "Your in-laws really outdid themselves this time," she said, reviewing my account of yesterday's events. "Moving your children's belongings without permission, giving away their rooms. It's perfect timing, actually." I nodded, pulling out my phone to show her the photos I'd taken last night. My children's possessions carelessly piled in boxes, the rooms completely transformed for the Petersons' kids, the makeshift sleeping area in the attic. "The house inspection is scheduled for tomorrow," Diana continued, "and the offer on the Victorian property on Maple Street is still good. Are you sure you're ready for this?" "More than ready," I replied, signing the documents in front of me. My children deserve better than being treated like second-class citizens in their own home. What Barbara and George didn't know was that 3 months ago, when my grandmother passed away, she left me more than enough money to buy our own place. I'd been waiting for the right moment to make our move, and they just handed it to me on a silver platter. Back at the house, Barbara was hosting a lunch for the Petersons, showing off how wonderfully she'd redecorated my children's rooms. I could hear Madison practicing her tennis swings against the wall, the same wall where Emma's beloved bookshelf used to be. "Amanda," Barbara called out when she saw me. "Come see how organized everything is now. The Petersons are so grateful for the space." I smiled politely, declining the invitation. "Actually, I need to talk to Michael about something important." I found my husband in his study, looking stressed and conflicted. "Michael," I said softly, "we need to make a decision. Your parents have gone too far this time." He ran his hands through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since college. I know. But they're just trying to help the Petersons. Maybe if we give it a few weeks." "Our children are sleeping in the attic, Michael. Their belongings are in boxes. How many more weeks should they endure that?" Before he could answer, the doorbell rang. Right on schedule, Tom Peterson, the children's father, arrived to check on his kids. I heard Barbara's delighted greeting, followed by a tour of the newly arranged spaces. "And look how perfect Madison's trophies look on these built-in shelves." Barbara's voice carried up the stairs. "Amanda's children barely use this room anyway, just collecting dust with all those books and toys." That's when Michael's expression changed. Perhaps it was hearing his mother dismiss his children's existence so casually, or maybe it was seeing the tears welling up in my eyes. Whatever it was, something finally clicked. "What do you need me to do?" he asked quietly. I handed him the papers Diana had prepared. "Sign these. It's time we stood up for our family." The next morning, while Barbara was helping the Peterson children prepare for their various lessons, the housing inspector arrived. I watched from the kitchen as she methodically went through each room, taking notes and photographs. "Mrs. Mitchell," she called out to Barbara, who had rushed to investigate the unexpected visitor, "I'm here to complete the inspection for the rental agreement." Barbara's face went pale. "Rental agreement? What rental agreement?" "The one filed yesterday," the inspector replied, checking her paperwork. "According to this, you're renting out rooms to the Peterson family." "That's ridiculous," Barbara sputtered. "This is our house. We're just helping friends." "Actually," I interjected calmly, "you're operating an illegal boarding house. You've accepted payment from the Petersons for the rooms, haven't you?" Barbara's silence was telling. I knew the Petersons had insisted on paying something for the space, and my in-laws would never turn down money. "That's what I thought," I continued. "Unfortunately, this neighborhood isn't zoned for such arrangements, and since you've displaced minor children to accommodate paying tenants." The inspector's eyebrows shot up. "Displaced minor children." I led her to the attic, where Emma and Jake's belongings were still piled in boxes. The inspector took more photos, her frown deepening as she documented the makeshift sleeping area. "This is a serious violation," she stated firmly. "The attic isn't approved for residential use, and displacing minors from their legal residence to accommodate paying tenants. I'll need to file a report immediately." Barbara stood frozen, her face cycling through shades of red and white. But we own this house. We can do what we want." "Actually," I said, pulling out another set of papers, "Michael and I have been paying the mortgage for the past 5 years. The house is in our names. You just live here." The truth hit Barbara like a physical blow. She'd always lorded their supposed ownership over us, using it as leverage to control our lives. But she'd never bothered to check the actual paperwork when Michael and I took over the payments years ago. "You can't do this," she whispered, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. "I already have," I replied. "The Petersons will need to find other arrangements immediately. And as for you and George, we'll be having a family meeting tonight about our new living arrangements." As I watched Barbara stumble away to make some frantic phone calls, I felt no satisfaction, only relief. Sometimes standing up for your children means making difficult choices, but I knew in my heart this was the right one. The Victorian house on Maple Street was waiting for us, its keys already in my pocket. Emma and Jake would each have a room twice the size of their old ones, with a shared playroom in between. Most importantly, they would have a home where they were valued, not tolerated. Barbara had no idea that her power play had just cost her everything, but she was about to find out. The family meeting that evening was exactly as tense as I'd expected. George and Barbara sat on one end of the dining room table, their usual confidence shattered. The Petersons had left hours ago, rushing to pack their children's belongings while muttering about being missiled. "So," George began, his voice gruff, "you've had this planned all along, haven't you? Waiting to humiliate us." I placed the keys to the Victorian house on the table. "No, I've been planning to protect my children. There's a difference." Michael, sitting beside me, finally found his voice. "Mom, Dad, you've left us no choice. The way you've treated Emma and Jake, it's been getting worse for years." Barbara's eyes narrowed. "We were trying to help our friends. Those children have real talent, real potential. And our children don't?" I cut in, my voice sharp. "Because they prefer reading comics to playing tennis? Because they'd rather build pillow forts than practice piano?" "That's not what Barbara started, but I wasn't finished. "You moved them to the attic, Barbara. The attic. Like some unwanted furniture you couldn't be bothered to store properly." George shifted uncomfortably. "Now, Amanda, you're being dramatic. It was temporary." "Everything's temporary with you both," Michael interrupted. "Every time you overstep, every time you hurt our children, it's always temporary or for the best or you're being too sensitive." He took a deep breath. "Well, you're right about one thing. It is temporary. Because we're moving out." The silence that followed was deafening. Barbara's face went through a range of emotions: shock, anger, fear, before settling on something close to panic. "Moving," she whispered. But this is your home. Where would you go?" I slid a photo of the Victorian house across the table. "Here. Closing is next week. 3 bedrooms, a playroom, and most importantly, no attic." "You can't afford," George started, but stopped when he saw my expression. "My grandmother's inheritance," I explained calmly. "The one you kept telling me was wasteful to save. Turns out it was exactly what we needed." Barbara started to cry, not her usual manipulative tears, but genuine sobs. "This is all because of the rooms. We can fix this. The Petersons will find somewhere else." "This isn't about the rooms," Michael said firmly. "This is about years of dismissing our children, of undermining our parenting, of treating Emma and Jake like they're somehow less worthy than other children. The rooms were just the final straw." I stood up, pulling out one last document. "You have 2 choices. Either you can move out by the end of the month or you can sign this agreement." "What agreement?" George asked, reaching for the paper. "New house rules. No more unilateral decisions about our children. No more comparing them to others. No more rearranging their lives without our permission. And most importantly, no more treating them like second-class citizens in their own home." Barbara's tears stopped abruptly. "You're giving us ultimatums. In our own." "My house," Michael corrected. "Our house." The one we've been paying for. Your names aren't on any of the paperwork, remember? The realization of just how much power they lost hit them both at once. Years of holding their supposed ownership over our heads, only to discover they had no legal claim at all. You have until tomorrow to decide, I said, standing up. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to help my children move their belongings back to their rooms. As I headed upstairs, I heard Barbara's muffled voice. George, do something. But there was nothing they could do. They'd played their hand and lost everything. The next morning, I found the signed agreement on the kitchen counter. Over the following weeks, the change in my in-laws was remarkable. Gone were the snide comments about Emma's comic book collection or Jake's love of building blanket forts. They even started showing genuine interest in their grandchildren's activities. One evening, as I watched Emma showing Barbara her latest art project, a comic book she created herself, I felt a gentle touch on my shoulder. It was Michael. Thank you, he whispered, for being strong enough to do what I should have done years ago. I squeezed his hand. Sometimes love means setting boundaries, even with family, maybe especially with family. 6 months later, Emma and Jake are thriving. Their rooms are their own sanctuaries again, filled with the things they love. Barbara and George have learned to be better grandparents, though I keep the signed agreement prominently displayed in my office as a reminder. The Victorian house keys still sit in my desk drawer. We didn't need to move after all. We just needed to stand our ground and demand respect for our children. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even or moving away. Sometimes it's about staying put and forcing others to change instead. Looking back, I'm grateful for that moment when my in-laws pushed too far. It gave us the courage to finally stand up and say enough is enough. And in doing so, we didn't just protect our children's rooms, we protected their right to be exactly who they are.